Nachman has an amazing approach to Torah study. Believe it or not, the world doesn't really know that much about his approach, but he has a very strong and solid approach to Torah study. It just has to be explained. In the Torah world at large, the main accepted approach to Torah study is to taking, for example, a page of Talmud and dissecting it and working on it for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and going on to all the commentaries and all types of intricacies. And it's very exciting for those who've tasted it. It's very powerful. There's a lot of mental gymnastics, and you feel a real special type of light and a kedusha when getting in this type of learning. Besides it being a work and development of the mind, but also because it's Torah, there is for sure a spiritual uplifting feeling. However, Rebbe Nachman, he stresses that learning like this leaves a person barren in like the majority of the rest of the Torah. He's only touched upon certain areas in his lifetime of Torah, never even begin to scratch upon the other areas. And the goal of the Torah is to touch upon every area of the Torah, to get to every corner of every level of Torah possible, just to touch it. Because there's a rule that whatever you learn in this world Torah, in the world to come, you're allowed to develop on it. However, if you didn't touch areas of Torah, so there's nothing to develop upon in the world to come. So the wise person will invest as much time as possible to cover ground. Bekiut, it's called. Cover ground. Learn everything. Learn everything. Rebbe Nachman said it's like those people who boast, these travelers, they boast of all the places they visited. I was in Spain, I was in France, I was in South America, I was in South Africa, I was in Alaska, I was in the Himalayas, and they boast of all the places. So to a person, not necessarily boasting as a haughty act, but he can take pride before Hashem and appreciate more of the experience of knowing Hashem due to the many places of the Torah that he's visited. He spent time in the Zohar, in the Midrash, in the Chumash, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, in the Maharsha, in the Rashba, in the Maharam Shif. He went through everything. So, going back, Rebbe Nachman's approach to Torah study is to cover ground. It's not necessarily his view only. The Gemara also, believe it or not, holds by that view when they say, Sinai ve'oker harim hechi adif. Someone who has broad knowledge of the Torah, or oker harim, someone who is able to uproot mountains. He has one area, but he's a master of that area. Which is more better, which is more important? So the Gemara's conclusion is, Sinai, someone who has a broad knowledge, even though not so deep, but he has a broad knowledge of the entire Torah, because everyone needs marechitaya, those who produce wheat. In other words, I need at least some knowledge of all the areas. So I know what to do, I know how to conduct, I know the awareness, which will enhance my awareness of the Torah, that it enhances my understanding by knowing, just touching upon many areas, it helps me understand better whatever I'm learning, B'ezrat Hashem. So again, Rebbe Nachman's approach in learning Torah is to cover ground. And this applies to everything. To learning Chumash simply with Rashi, to go through it, Tanakh, the Bible, the Mishnah, not to be so hasty also to immediately do what's called Chazara. The Gemara speaks about the damaged cause when a person doesn't review what he's learning. But the question is, when do you review? Do you review immediately after every page, after every book, after every section? Rebbe Nachman's approach is to finish a whole section, for example, finish the entire Talmud, and then start again. And the review will be the second time you're learning it. Any book, any series, any set, to go through it, and then to do the review. And the second point, Rebbe Nachman said, don't be so involved to make sure I understand every single point. Learn swiftly, you got the point, you don't have to kill yourself to understand every single point. People will say, well, then you're not developing your brain and everything. Rebbe Nachman says, and a very important point, by broad knowledge, covering ground, and then learning it a second time, your understanding of the item is much greater than the person who just spent all of his time invested in understanding the point until he understood it 100% at his present level. Whereas when a person learns an item and goes on and finishes everything of that book, of that series, and then starts again, all the added additional knowledge that he's amassed before and after that item adds up to when he reads it the second time, he understands it much better. You hear this? Much better than the person who just invested his present level awareness and understanding at his present level that item in its entirety. So Rebbe Nachman's approach again, to cover ground. Once Rebbe Nachman told Rebbe Nosson, I want you to start learning Kabbalah, the Arizal's major work called the Etz Chaim, to learn the book of the Arizal, the Etz Chaim. So Rebbe Nosson says, but I don't understand what I'm learning. How could it be learning if I don't understand? There's a halacha, and the Magen Avraham brings down in the Code of Jewish Law, that learning without understanding, just to read like this without understanding, is not considered learning. You have to make the effort to understand what you're learning. So Rav Nosson's question was valid. How could there's so many things in the Kabbalah I don't understand. What do you want me to do? So Rebbe Nachman told him, wherever you don't understand, mark with a pencil. Okay? You're going to the Arizal's book of Kabbalah, and of course Rebbe Nachman felt Rav Nosson was ready to learn Kabbalah. Not everybody's ready to learn Kabbalah. In this case, Rebbe Nachman he told Rav Nosson, you should start learning the Kabbalah. So he told him again, go through the book, the Etz Chaim, go through it. Every place you don't understand, underline it with a pencil, finish the book, start it again. And every time, and go through the book again. You'll see, as you go through the second time, your understanding is much more advanced and enhanced, and you'll begin to erase the places where now you originally marked that you don't understand. You'll see, you begin to understand them, you can erase the pencil marks. So Rav Nosson afterwards said that as he went through the Etz Chaim again and again, he was able to erase more and more of the pencil marks. So Rebbe Nachman's approach, cover ground. We'll just sum up with this amazing story with one of the big rabbinical rabbis of the Gemara, Rav Chanan Spector of Kovno. In other words, of the modern day Talmud Yeshiva world. Rav Chanan Spector of Kovno, who was once sent a letter by a yeshiva student in another yeshiva. Please help me, Rebbe. I can't understand this Tosfot on this specific page. I'm going nuts. I can't go on in my learning until I understand this Tosfot. It's driving me crazy. I can't do it. So Rav Chanan Spector wrote back to him, no problem. See this Tosfot on the other Gemara. There's another Gemara on this page. Go to that Tosfot and you'll see the answer. So the student went to that Tosfot and it didn't talk to him. He went back, I'm sorry, but he's talking about something else totally, the Tosfot there. It has nothing to do with the Tosfot that I asked you about. So Chanan Spector, he wrote back, did you see what Tosfot did there? And that Tosfot that I sent you to? They asked a question and they had no answer. And yet there's the next Tosfot. After that Tosfot, they left over a question mark, no answer, and yet they went on. So too you have a question you can't understand. Don't stop the whole world because of it. Keep on going. Rebbe Nachman's approach to Torah study, proved and tested to work. B'ezrat Hashem, we should learn Torah using Rebbe Nachman's approach.